He double-checked his GPS, and it led him deeper into the town. Were the buildings screwing it up? Was the storm screwing it up? He heard thunder in the background and wasn't afraid. He felt like he was born in a storm. He simply smiled. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen. They kept searching for an exit, and he turned on a radio. The radio said there was no evacuation calls, and there was a clear exit to the other side of the city. Luxon guided his few friends that way. It was dark now. He had to trust this was the way out. He heard thunder in the background as he sat in the traffic, listening to the radio. Within a few minutes, the power blipped outside the city, or out in the city. There was a break in the radio transmission, and then it was back up within a few minutes. Broadcasting on emergency power, this is an emergency alert. Power is out in the city, and the last of the exits are snarled. Authorities are recommending to find somewhere to shelter in place. Luxon looked ahead, and a mob was already going car to car. He'd seen this before many times. He pulled his car to the shoulder and got out before he could get surrounded. He pounded on his friend's vehicle window. His friend rolled the window down. "We got a problem. Punks searching car to car. We aren't going to get out of here on vehicles. We need to go mobile." There were some window smashing sounds up ahead and a scream. That was all the group needed. They pulled their vehicles to the side and all got out and started gearing up. It was time to get out of here. Luxon got into the road and addressed the punks smashing into cars trying to get at the people inside. He looked down the road and there were already several cars on fire. Luxon had seen this before also. They were throwing road flares in cars. Not good. "Hey, punks, over here." They looked at him and exchanged words. They rushed over to attack him, 10 or 20 in number. He just stood there, leaning on his cane, smiling. When the first two got close enough, he shifted on his cane. They looked at him as if it was a joke, like he was going to fight them off with his cane. With the end of his staff, there were taser protrusions, which he used to tase an exposed portion of the first guy that got too close. The guy instantly went down, screaming. The next several gentlemen had no exposed skin, so Luxon tugged and twisted on the handle and a sword came out. The punks went down immediately to the blade before Luxon was surrounded, or so they thought. Within moments, the bad guys were flanked on both sides and fully geared barbarian-looking Viking warriors. The punks only lasted a few seconds. The merry team then headed towards the roadblock to see what was going on. Chapter 15, Knuckles, stuck in traffic. Evening. Knuckles trip-checked again and everything was blocked. Getting out south was completely stopped. Getting out north was blocked by police activity or some such. He figured that they must be trying to lock down Capitol Hill and get all the politicians out that weren't on the good side of the protesters. This isn't good, he thought. He didn't want to get stuck in traffic. He didn't want to hang out here for the night. Maybe east was the safest bet. He had to drive west a bit to drive east, so that's what he did. They puttered on for a few blocks. Knuckles learned that his gun store passenger's name was Tom. Tom was a nice guy, just trying to make a living. Business had been up since a lot of the left had started purchasing guns like never before in history, but sporadic civil unrest lately had made it almost too dangerous. He had to empty his store every time since the damage and theft wasn't reimbursable. Today, though, his van was in the shop. Thankfully, Knuckles had come along. It was plenty dark out now, and there was thunder off in the distance. Knuckles still had his gloves on, and he was thinking about that in the dark as they were in stop-and-go traffic. He asked Tom to hand him the bag by his feet. "There's 2 bags. Which one?" "The one from the hardware store." Knuckles got the pieces out and had an idea. His gloves didn't quite have the impact he was looking for, and this night had the potential to get significantly more dangerous. He started messing around with the brackets and nuts and bolts. Within a few minutes, he had 2 pairs of knuckle dusters. He looked at them and smiled and set them on the dash. "Those are pretty cool," Tom said. Knuckles agreed and was thankful for the kind words. Knuckles was really missing his wife and kid and dog right now. He thought about checking his phone when he was about to turn around, but everything was stopped. The storm was close. The firearms and ammo were stored in the back of Knuckles' truck, which had a canopy. Nobody knew the equipment was in there, but he didn't want to risk the attention for too long. Up ahead, he saw a commotion. He asked Tom if he could drive the truck, and he could. "I'm going to get out and see if I can help clear this up. Leave the engine running and don't get out of the truck for anything. As soon as a path is open, take it, and I'll hang on to the side until we're safe." Before Tom could protest, Knuckles grabbed his hardware equipment and jumped out of the truck. Tom slid over to his spot. Up ahead, he saw some Viking-looking people fighting something, he couldn't tell. As he got closer, they looked like people clad in black. As the rain started to fall, the lights went out. With only vehicles illuminating the situation, Knuckles tightened his grip with the two bolted dusters he'd made and started going to work. He couldn't see the end of their group, but all that did was make him smile. Chapter 16, Malaise, Dark Escape, late evening. Malaise used her phone as a light and found her way to some candles. She kept them lit for a while and low to the floor in hopes that the light wouldn't reflect out into the world too much. She didn't want to attract attention. Malaise looked outside and it was quickly turning into chaos. There were several burned cars lighting shadows. Of people running in every direction. She had a really bad feeling. This wasn't normal. There was no law enforcement. She turned on the radio quietly so Darcy couldn't hear. The city was in lockdown, nobody in or out. Shelter in place was what the repeating voice kept saying. Malaise didn't like that. "We need to get out of here," she mumbled to herself, a little too loud. "What, Malaise?" I said that I needed to make a message to my dad, and then we've got to go." She wrote out a note to her dad and held it out in front of her and took a selfie with the backdrop being outside. She had very few bars, but tried to send the pic. Her phone was at half power and looked to be struggling with the cell tower. It wasn't sending. The towers were too weak on auxiliary power and the load from everywhere. Everyone panicking. "No, we need to stay, right? There are people that come and help, like in situations like this, like FEMA or the Marines or something." "Darcy, I'm not going to tell you to come with me. What I need to do is extremely dangerous, but I can promise that if it works, we'll both be very safe. Rule number 1 is that the best person to take care of you is you." Malaise went in the other room and grabbed her 3-day pack that her dad had helped her make. It had a tiny tent and food and medical and tiny sleeping bag. There's also enough food to last a few days and a few ways to purify water and also a survival knife, compass, 2 flashlights, and a multi-tool. She thought for a second and went to her dad's safe. Inside was a 9mm takedown carbine that folded in half with a collapsed stock that made it really small. She filled all of her pockets with mags for it and stuffed the carbine in the sleeve of her pack. Malaise remembered her dad explaining that the carbine took the most popular mag in the world for handguns, so that seemed like an extra good choice. She took a few extra boxes of 9mm and stuffed them in her pack. They were heavy, that was for sure. Darcy walked around the corner to see what she was doing. "A gun? Why do we need a gun, Malaise? Guns are scary." "Don't worry, Darcy. It's just a last resort, so we can be equal to everyone else out there, you know." "Is it loud?" "No, these are subsonic rounds. Not too loud." "But it looks scary." "Actually, it's just a fancy pistol. They shoot these little rounds. See?" Malaise showed Darcy a 9mm bullet. It seemed to make sense to her, and she stopped asking about it. Without missing a beat, Malaise grabbed a handful of wool socks and shoved them into one of Darcy's trash bags. Had a second thought and filled the rest of the bag with all the feminine hygiene products they had on hand. It didn't amount for much to the 2 girls, and Malaise went back and shut and locked the safe. Thankfully, it wasn't an electric only, and turned to face Darcy. Darcy was starting up a new round of questions about the reasons why they didn't need a gun and how she wouldn't allow Malaise to shoot anybody. "Darcy, we need to go. Are you ready? You can't stay here. We can't stay here." Malaise interrupted before she could get going again. There was yelling from the hallway. Malaise remembered that she had set the mask's filter aside as she saw it sitting on the counter. She took it and screwed it in after taking the seal off so she wouldn't forget or lose it. She had a feeling it would come in handy. She was ready. "Darcy, I'll go first, and you stay right behind me, okay? I won't leave you, but you got to keep up." "Okay," Darcy said sheepishly. She didn't seem to be able to decide what she was more scared of, so she was on survival autopilot by this point. Malaise put her glove on and pulled her mask down. It was go time. Malaise walked to the door and figured which side the shouting was coming from. It was coming from the next condo over. The walls were doing nothing to insulate the anger. Malaise quietly opened the door, and nobody was waiting out there. She motioned Darcy to follow and quietly shut the door and locked it. She did this mostly by feeling and memory since it was pitch black. After quietly locking the door, Malaise put the keys in her pocket. They tried to sneak past the room where the guy was yelling. They unfortunately had to go past that room to exit. He was yelling something about how he knew this would always happen, and instead of buying food and a firearm, they bought shoes and vacations. The angry guy had completely forgot what it was to be a man and actually had to do the right thing for his family. It disgusted Malaise.